But okay. Okay, so are we good to go, or should we
Yes. Dana's going to introduce you.
Yes,
So
namaste
welcome,
all.
Dana. And one sec, let me just start the recording.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome, Dana, and off you go. So over to you, Dana.
Yes, namaste you all. I'm happy to be with you today, and better to say Satnam in the presence of our speaker, Sat Sri Halsa. I will just shortly introduce her because she's a well-known practitioner of Jyotish. She's a full-time practitioner of Vedic astrology and an honors graduate of Harvard University. She's a Kundalini yoga teacher, and her guru, Yogi Bhajan, encouraged her to study Jyotish, and she succeeded in this field, as we can all see. Sat Siriji has lectured around the world on various topics, including spiritual astrology, financial astrology, and how to time and predict events. She's very good at it. All we adore her brilliant research, and today she will be speaking on analyzing the United States' upcoming election as an example of doing predictions with Tithi Pravesh and the Sarvatophadra chakra. I believe we all studied Sarvatophadra chakra only because of Satsiriji's sessions. Thank you so much, Satsiriji, and over you.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Donna. Okay, so yeah, this turns out to be a very timely topic, talking about this upcoming election in the US. Nothing is calm or peaceful around these issues, so we hope to put our calm spiritual vibration into it. So I'm going to start with always thanking my mentors, my gurus, and the golden chain, the divine golden chain that we are all a part of. And I'm going to just, instead of, okay, well, we'll do Om Gurave Namah 3 times. Om Gurave Namah. Om Gurave Namah. Om Gurave Namah. And I will read a prayer from, or a shloka from Guru Arjan Dev, who gave this fantastic description of what is a pundit within his spiritual poem, Sukhmani. So I'll read this. It's just a couple of short verses. I'll read it first in Gurumukhi and then in English. So pundit, Jo man parbode, Ram Nam Atam Mesode, Ram Nam Saras Pibe, Os Pandit Ke Upadesh Jagjive. Har Ki Kata Hirde Basave, So Pandit Fir Jona Ave. Bed Puran Smriti Buje Mul, Sukhamame Jane Astul, Chau Varna Ko De Upadesh, Nanak Os Pandit Ko Sada Ades. He is a scholar or pundit who instructs his mind. He searches for Ram's name in his heart and drinks the exquisite nectar of the master's name. The world lives by the teaching of that pundit who implants Hari's gospel in his heart. That pundit enters not into birth again. He who digs to the roots of the Vedas, Puranas, and Smritis and recognizes the visible as contained in the invisible and instructs all the 4 castes, Nanak says, to such a pundit I forever bow. Okay, so we're going to use our pundit skills to try to make a prediction. And whenever we make predictions, we are faced with some possible pitfalls because we're all subject to bias and cognitive distortion, and especially in very emotional issues where there is huge investment in either side of something. We tend to project our own desires and fears. So this is what we always have to kind of keep that in mind when we make a prediction. So in trying to prepare these slides, I had that really in mind. And then also once we make the prediction, we can still fall flat on our face, even when we follow all the rules. But so I'll just read through these slides. Just like most people, Jyotishis are susceptible to cognitive distortions, which are usually unconscious thought patterns producing inaccurate views of situations or people. These distortions can include jumping to conclusions, either or thinking, negative mental filtering, sweeping generalizations, mind reading, or emotional reasoning, believing that if what we are thinking is associated with a strong emotion, it must be true. So the rules of the sages help us to get past these pitfalls. Jyotish is, we can think of it as a game of principles, very high principles. And we learn slowly as we are becoming Jyotishis, we learn so many principles, and then we begin to learn how to prioritize them, how to make them work together. And yet we always have to remember that we're going by these principles. And for Raja Yoga, like for picking who's going to be a head of state, the chart with the best match to the rules should be winning. So the first thing in making a prediction is to decide what are the rules we're going to go by as we look at charts. And then we have to assess them systematically and logically. So I'm going to use 4 different steps for making this prediction. And the first step, so we have 4 guidelines for predicting something like an election. And so these should be universally applicable to any situation where you have to predict an election or something with a, yes or no outcome. Prajra has given yogas for gaining a kingdom or making one a president or chief minister. So we're just going to focus on 2 yogas Prajra has given. One is Karmesha, which involves the 10th Lord being exalted or in its own sign. And the other is the 10th Lord in or aspecting Lagna. The other is Amatya Yoga, the 10th Lord conjunct or aspected by the dispositor of the Amatya Karaka, or the 10th Lord conjunct or aspected by the Amatya Karaka itself. Okay, so we see we have a huge focus on the 10th Lord. The second step, we will focus on one Varga, one divisional chart that is perfect for seeing power, self-assertion, and especially giving Raj Yoga and giving, the power of being the head of state. And this is given by Jaimini. He tells us to focus on the D5, Panchamamsha, which is not in Prajra's, Shodasha Varga, but it is like a specialized Varga that is extremely accurate for power issues. And then the third factor is we'll use a dasha for timing when someone can climb up to the throne. And so it's Guruji taught it years ago, and he talked about village. It's a village dasha. Maybe it's from the Nadis, but I just call it Naisargika Graha Rashi Tulya Amsha, and we'll explain it as we go forward. And finally, we'll confirm with transits. And my favorite map for studying transits is Sarvata Bhadra Chakra. So we'll go into that to confirm our conclusion that we will gradually come to. Okay, so the Panchamamsha, which we'll use, so we'll look at these Prajari yogas in both Rashi chart and in the D5 chart. So for those not familiar with the Panchamamsha, here is how it is mapped. We use the Parivriti version. There's two different versions of it. And this is for power, strength, royal courage, authority, and self-assertion. Like you can use it personally in your own chart if you are, let's say, you're in a court case or you're just thinking about power dynamics between you and someone else. This chart will give you a great snapshot. So it's calculated in a very straightforward way, and it's in most softwares, and it's just dividing the Rashi into 6-degree segments, 5 6-degree segments, and we go around in Parivriti. Actually, it's not straight Parivriti because it has to do, it's a complicated pattern having to do with the 159 powers. But we can come back to that. We won't get into the calculation of it exactly, but this is the basic map for it. Okay, so now we're going to apply Prajari yogas to the D1 and D5, and considering my focus in thinking about this is that we want to avoid bias. So I'm just going to refer to the candidates to start with as candidate X and candidate Y. And I'm using the Pravesh charts. So for this part of looking at the yogas, because if we use the natal chart, these people may have been in more than one election. This is not their first election. So these yogas must be present in the natal charts, but how do we fine tune it for right now, this election, this year, this moment in history? So this is where we use the Pravesh. And so I've used the Tithi Pravesh, which we have more experience with. We know that Tithi is the currents of emotion and deep feelings that make things happen, the desires, but also as a result of these great workshops, I also realized it would be possibly even more appropriate to use the Yoga Pravesh. So I'm also going to look at the Yoga Pravesh. The Yoga Pravesh, as I think Andrew Foss mentioned, is, the daily yoga, the Nitya Yoga in the Panchang is based on Akash Tattva. And Akash is the binding force that holds everything together. So we can think of it as like an overarching limb of the Panchang, maybe the central limb in the 5 limbs. And so I think it's very powerful. So I find, so I did it and it works great. It should not contradict the Tithi Pravesh, but we'll discuss that. So what you do is, in order to use this in a prediction, of course, you need to know the birth charts of the candidates. If you're in a situation where you don't have birth charts for the candidates, then you'll have to use other resources, and we could talk about that separately. But for now, we're fortunate that we do have good birth times for both candidates. So I'll just take our guidelines, which are our 2 yogas, and I just analyze them. And this is for the Tithi Pravesh, and then we'll also quickly mention the Yoga Pravesh. For each candidate, without saying who is who, I'm going to ask you, our participants, for your judgment, for your prediction after we do just this first step. Okay, so pay attention. We've got, I'm giving the results for you before you see the chart, that when we look at X, we get the 10th Lord being a Rahu in the 11th house, conjunct Mars. Now, Rahu with Mars is called Kuja Stambhana, where Rahu has a paralyzing effect on Mars. And Mars rules the Ayush stability of Rahu. And then our second condition is Rahu in or aspecting Lagna? No. Our third condition is the 10 Lord conjunct or aspected by the AMK dispositor. The AMK for the chart is Mars, the dispositor is Jupiter, and there's no connection. And then the fourth rule, is it conjunct the AMK? Yes, Rahu is conjunct the AMK, but also, you know, right now when we're looking at nodes, there's a Mula Trikona sign exchange. Rahu in Virgo, Rahu in Pisces, Ketu in Virgo, and they both have a strong desire to be in the opposite sign, so they go through an exchange. And in the Panchamamsha, the Rahu is in its own sign, but it's conjunct Mars again. And so we look at the exaltation lord of Rahu because it's in its own sign. This will be Mercury, who is Bhadikesh in MKS. And the Rahu has no connection to D5 Lagna. Okay, so that's candidate X. Now we look at candidate Y, and we see the 10th Lord Mercury is in the third house, conjunct Mars in its own sign, and the Sun. Mars, the exaltation Lord, is Saturn in its own sign. Saturn's exaltation Lord is Venus, and Venus is in Lagna. The 10th Lord Mercury is also the Lagna Lord, and it's in exchange with the third Lord in Lagna. For condition 3, the 10th Lord Mercury is the AK in exchange with Ketu, which is conjunct AMK, and Mercury is dispositor of AMK. And the fourth condition, the 10th Lord Mercury is also conjunct the Pitrikaraka Sun and the Bhavakaraka Mars, and Rahu Ketu doing the sign exchange put Rahu as the Darakaraka in Digbala. And then the last step, check the D5. There we see Mercury is the Lagna Lord in exchange with the moon in the Lagna and conjunct the Putrakaraka Shani, which can be important for politics. Mercury is the dispositor of AMK and the Matrikaraka moon and the Bhatrikaraka Jupiter, and Mercury is the AK. Okay, so just reciting all these conditions for the yogas. I'm now can already put it to the audience. How would you predict? Okay, so we've got our conditions. We went through, X or Y, and judge by those principles. This looks like we have a question. Let's see. View. Okay. Questions? Okay, questions. If X in 10th house is Aquarius, why not consider Saturn? Okay, good question. Sharp, good Jyotish question. Because Shani is there in Kumbha, in its own sign. So our practice is when a planet is in its, or just Prajur says, when the Lord of Aquarius or Scorpio is in its own sign, you must take the other nodal Lord or the other planet between, Shani and Rahu. If Shani is in Kumbha, then take Rahu as the Lord. So just doing that strict Prajuri thing, Rahu is the Lord. Okay, so now let's see how awake everybody is. Some of us, it's 4:30 in the morning, some it's 5 in the morning. Okay, let's have a poll in the chat. Let's see how many would vote for X and how many for Y as or predict. We're not voting, but we're predicting. Just given these principles. Oh, I think on my next slide, I show you the whole principle so you can decide. Yeah, okay, so here I listed it on the slide, X principles, Y principles. So I'll give you a minute and
Satsiri, the chat is disabled.
Okay,
At least
I hear you. Oh,
Sorry. I'm doing this. Sorry about that. Ooh, hang on a minute. Sorry, guys. Give me a moment. Sorry about this.
no problem. You have to figure out how.
Yeah, I've just kind of forgotten. Okay. Chat. Yes. Okay, please try now.
Okay, so we'll give you a couple minutes. I'll just step away for a moment and we'll give you a few minutes you can read through the principles again and then make your prediction. Okay, let's see. Let's look in chat here. Okay. Okay. Got it. Why? Okay, very good. Okay. Okay, excellent. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, very good. All right, so those who are making their prediction are definitely leaning towards Y. Okay, excellent. I mean, when we go back and look at the rules, I would definitely agree that Y is the one adhering much more closely to the Amatya Yoga and the Dharmesha Yoga, because the 10th Lord is so involved with all these other principles as opposed to with Y, as opposed to with X. The 10th Lord is out of most of the principles. So if we are guided by the principles, we should be choosing Y. Okay, let's go on. So now we'll actually see the charts, and I'm still trying to keep the identity of the candidates masked because we're trying to stay in neutral mind. I mean, obviously in a situation like this, there can be strong emotions and strong feelings one way and the other when you're dealing with a polarized situation. So, some of you will know the birth time and be able to figure out backwards which Tithi Pravesh is which person's chart, but just try to stay neutral anyway. So this is one Tithi Pravesh of candidate X. And so when we put this with the rules, remember, here are our rules. So I'm just reviewing because my whole purpose here is to make us stick to the rules, okay? So here we have 10th Lord exalted and an own sign, 10th Lord inner aspecting lagna, etc. Those are our 4 rules. And then here, again, just repeating what we did originally, the 10th Lord is really afflicted because Rahu and Mars is an affliction. The 10th Lord, Rahu, is not aspecting Lagna. The 10th Lord is not connected with the dispositor Jupiter of the AMK. And the 10th Lord is conjunct the AMK, but this exchange is problematic. And if Mars goes because of the exchange opposite to Rahu, then Mars in the 7th is a problem. So there's a lot of problems. And the exaltation Lord of Rahu is Mercury, who's in the D5. Here's our D5. And we see, we want to look closely at Rahu. It's with Mars again in the 3rd house. And the exaltation Lord of Mars is Saturn, which is with a debilitated Sun. The exaltation Lord we should be looking at, is Mercury, because Rahu is in its own sign. So if we say it is at the tattva level of Vayu tattva, it's full of storm and air energy. We look at it, the planetary Lord is Mercury. The exaltation Lord is Mercury, who is difficult in MKS in the 7th house. Sometimes we say Mercury's MKS in the 7th house is not so bad. It's worse in the 4th house, but it's in its own sign. So again, we can look at the exaltation Lord of Buddha, Mercury. And in that case, for Mercury, we have to take Sun. When Mercury is own sign, we don't really have an exaltation Lord to go to, but instead we look at Surya, the king. The prince follows the king. And here we see Surya in a very bad state, in a Pitri dosha. So, this is X, candidate X. Now, since our theme for these workshops is Panchanga, I'm adding in the Panchanga. And since this is a Tithi Pravesh, we should focus on the Tithi Lord. And as we can see here in this little box, the Tithi Lord, this is 15 Purnima. And so the Tithi Lord, actually the Tithi Lord should be Shani. This I misspoken here, because the Tithi Lord for Purnima is should be Shani, but we see this Shani Surya Pitri dosha is problematic. Those two are battling it out, and one is debilitating the other. Lagna is the debility sign of Rahu, the Tithi Lord. If we took Rahu, sorry, I think I got that part wrong. So we can also apply the Karana as the child of the Tithi. And so thanks to Sonal waking us up to the Karanas, we see this is Baba Karana, and the Lord is, the sign for that is Leo, and the Nata is Mars. So we see this Mars is 7th from Leo. That's not happy for the Karana, and it's in this Kuja Stambhana. Sun is the Lord of Bhava in the regular numbering system, and it's Nicha, the 9th Lord in Nicha. So we can expect falling, possibly scandals. No Dharma, the 9th Lord is very afflicted, and no grace. Okay, now we are also going to do Yoga Pravesh. And there's something very fascinating to learn for great quick snapshot predictions using Yoga Pravesh. So this is the same candidate, his Yoga Pravesh. It's almost the same chart because if the natal chart is a full moon or a new moon, the Yoga Pravesh and Tithi Pravesh will be virtually the same because the sun and moon relationship comes out to be together, the same. What we do with the yoga, the Nitya Yoga, the daily yoga in the Panchang, is since it's calculated from Pusha Nakshatra, that means, number 1 yoga connects to number 7 nakshatra, number 8 nakshatra, Pusha. So if we simply add 7 to the yoga number, every yoga is numbered, then we will find the nakshatra that it corresponds to. So yes, we can map the Nitya yogas to the nakshatras. And that is very useful in making predictions based on Panchang. So when we add 7 to this yoga here, as it shows in this box, most software will have a way to know the number of the yoga. When we add 7 to 23, we get 30, and we have to subtract the circle of 27 nakshatras. So we come out with number 3.
I had a £2 deal on milk, so that's why I bought 3.
Oh, good.
So this this yoga,
But I had to park on around the back. Churches,
this yoga, let's see, I think we need to mute people. So this yoga, which is Shubha Yoga, maps when we do the mapping of yogas to nakshatras, and you can make a table of that you can use for permanent reference. It maps to Kritika nakshatra. So Kritika in Vimshottari is ruled by the sun. So the sun becomes extremely important to understand the outcome for Tithi Pravesh. So when we look at the D5, we see the sun again is Nicha. So here we have all the information on one slide. And so I'm just noting that when the natal chart is near full or new moon, the yoga and Tithi Pravesh will be very close. Here, the only difference we would see would be between the D5 of the Yoga Pravesh versus the D5 of Tithi Pravesh. So this D5 can just give us a snapshot. This is Yoga Pravesh. So examine the yogi, and it maps to Kritika. Look at its Lord's sun. It's Vimshottari Lord's sun. The sun is destroyed. The sun, moon are in Amavasya and Gandanta, with the sun's worst enemies, Venus and Saturn, in this terrible yoga with it, in the 10th house of karma. The sun's sign is Leo, which is in the 8th house. The sun is also the Varesha, the weekday lord. So the energy is flagging, getting weaker. The sun is afflicted by Shani, by Mangal, by Rahu. It's basically in an unrelieved curse. And, as Guruji Sanjay Rath has told us, that any divisional chart that has a sun-moon conjunction in it, the significations of that area of life are likely to be destroyed unless the sun-moon conjunction is in a fire sign. So here we have the opposite of that. It's not in a fire sign. The sun is Nicha. And this Rahu is the 10th lord of our Yoga Pravesh Rashi chart. And it is the dispositor of the Amatyakaraka, Shani. And it is... It's in its own sign, but its exaltation dispositor, again, is weak in this D5. It's in the 7th house. And the sign Lord Shani is in a Pitri dosha, Gandanta, pravraja, karmic mess, meaning the person just has to renounce. The Lagna Capricorn is the Badak Rashi. We also compare the Lagna of D5, and it is in the Badak Rashi of the Rashi chart. So again, that's a sign of problems. Okay, so now we'll look at the candidate Y and go through a comparison of the rules, just going step by step through all the rules. This is the Tithi Pravesh for candidate Y, meaning the chart done before the election of the year, their birth year that comes right before the election. And so we'll check this out with the D5. So here we have our rules up here that we're just focusing on these rules. And here we have the analysis that we already went through. It's a very complicated situation as there's a parivartana between the Virgo Lagna and the Scorpio with the 3 planets in the 3rd house, putting a special argala on the Lagna. But when we go through all the rules, we see that every principle we're looking for is fully fulfilled here and then some, because there's a lot of confluence, a lot of rich interfusing of different principles within our main guideline principles. Then when we go to the Tithi, because this is a Tithi Pravesh, we want to focus on Tithi. The Tithi Lord for number 13 is, it should be, yeah, sorry, I'm mixing up my, number 13 is, I'm getting confused with my 9, 10, is actually Jupiter, right? It should be Jupiter for 13th Tithi. So
I want to make a note of the timings of these because we might want to edit this out so she's getting more coherent sort of presentation.
Would everybody please mute themselves?
Fernand, I think you need to mute yourself.
okay, so you can say the Tithi Lord is Jupiter. So let's say Jupiter is with Moon. It's in the 8th house. So that can be a problem. But the Lord of it is Mars, which is in its own sign. Again, Mars, we go to its exaltation Lord, Shani, own sign. We go to its exaltation Lord, Venus in Lagna. So then when we look into the D5, we see that the Lagna Lord Mercury is in a parivartana with the moon. So that's a Shri Yoga. 1 and 2 have an exchange. And Mercury is the dispositor of the Amatyakaraka, as well as being the 10th Lord, and as well as being the AK. So Mercury is hugely influential. And if we look at the Karana, it's Taitila Karana, and Venus is the knot, and it's in the key sign is Libra, which is the 5th house in the D5. Venus is Digbala. It's in Ucha Amsha. And we may be concerned because Venus is Nicha, but this parivartana is going on. You know, Rahu in Pisces is not happy because Rahu is about strong desires, and it's very happy in Virgo because Rahu in Virgo can get into the details of exactly what it desires. It can pick apart it can bring down to earth exactly what it desires in every detail, because that is the gift of Kanya, of Virgo. And so in Pisces, it feels like it's swimming around and nowhere and can't grab onto anything. Whereas when Rahu is in Virgo, it's extremely efficient in its Mula Trikona, where it details out exactly how to achieve its strong desires. Ketu, on the other hand, is unhappy in Virgo because it's stuck in the mud and it wants to be in the cosmic freedom of Pisces, pralaya, moksha. So Ketu goes to Pisces and Rahu goes to Virgo. So that kind of an exchange is actually a very powerful thing that is going on now while the nodes are in these two opposite signs from where they do their best work. So that exchange will happen, and if it drags Venus with it, it puts Venus into exaltation. Okay. So now checking the Yoga Pravesh for candidate Y, the yoga number, all we have to do is a quick snapshot of the yoga. You know, when you get skilled at this, it can be very easy. We take the yoga, it's Vyatipata, which is number 17. We add number 7 to it, or add 7 to the yoga number to find nakshatra it corresponds to. From 17, we get 24, which is Satabishaj. And Satabishaj is a favorable nakshatra that's ruled in Vimshotri by Rahu, but it's considered a very good nakshatra. It's called the 100 lights, or the 100 physicians, 100 solutions to every problem. And so we should just focus on Rahu to see how that is. And we see this exchange going on. So something that looks one way will turn out to be the exact opposite way. And so here we have Rahu in the 8th house in Pisces, but because of this exchange, this flip, Rahu is pulling Venus towards exaltation. And if we take Rahu, you can take the yoga, you know, the significator of the yoga as a lagna and do argalas on it. And when we do the argalas on Rahu, from here, we see what is in the second from it, giving Dan Argala, a huge Raj Yoga. Sun, Moon are conjunct, but in the kingship sign, where they're very effective, with Mangal, their own dispositor, the exaltation lord of Sun. So that's totally a yoga for kingship. And in the 4th from Rahu is Jupiter, who gives like a Mahanta Yoga, a good soul in the 4th from Jupiter in the 4th. Is a yoga for, you know, a great soul, especially if it's supported by Moon, which is, it's not particularly, but it's there. And then we take the 5th, which is power, and there we see Mercury, which, you know, is the AK in the 5th with Shani, you know, but Shani is the Pitri Karaka, having to do with the old man who comes to power. So we're dealing with a contest between two old men. And then we have this exchange going on, which is going to completely turn the tables from how things might appear. Now, one thing that also we can note when we look at this chart, and actually I had to go through the rules again, of course, because we're dealing with a different chart now, you know, unlike for candidate X, where the two charts were the same, the 10th Lord was the same. Here it's different. So we have to, you know, recheck our 4 guiding principles. When we do that, we see the 10th Lord is now Ketu, which is different from how the Tithi Pravesh was. But when we do Ketu, it's in an amazing double exchange because, first of all, we have a parivartana between the Scorpio 10th house ruled by Ketu and the 8th house ruled by Mercury. And then we have the nodal exchange between Rahu and Ketu. And this Mars is in Ruchika Mahapurush, and the Sun and Mars are in Digbala. Then the co-lord of the 10th. So the first lord is Ketu because Mars is in Scorpio, so we should focus on Ketu, but we can say Mars is the co-lord. And same with the Lagna. The actual lord we should use is Rahu, but we can say Saturn is the co-lord. And they're both in Mahapurush yogas, Sasa Mahapurush for Shani, Ruchika Mahapurush for Mangal. And these two have this Kendra linkage. It's called Paraspara Yoga when two Kendra lords, are dignified. It's like they're linked. So this is a yoga of 1 in 10. So that's our second condition, that we want connection to Lagna from the 10th. And we have a very beautiful, strong connection between 1 and 10 through that Paraspara Yoga and all these other things. Now, when we check the Amatya principles, our Amatya Karaka here is Venus. And so we want to see the 10th lord, and its dispositor is Mercury. So we already saw the Parivartana links Ketu and Mercury very well. And Mercury is the AK, as well as the dispositor of AMK. So this is like deep confluence of principles. This is just like rasa, flavor of principles. There's just so much juice in all this connection of principles. And then we take the 10th lord Ketu, which is conjunct the Amatya Karaka. So every one of these conditions is not just, meagerly satisfied. It's satisfied in great depth. So when we're playing the game of principles, that's what we have to be guided by. Okay, so now we have looked at the yogas, we've looked into the Varga, and now we'll talk about dasha. So the dasha for timing our climbing to the throne is Naisargika Graha Rashi Tulya Amsha, or we can just call it a village dasha. And so using this, we'll go in back to the natal charts, because this is something that changes over time. And, from one election cycle to another, it will be recognizably different. So going back to candidate X, this is his natal chart. And we're going to do this dasha from natal chart, carrying the planetary placements to the D5 for power. And this is candidate Y. And we'll do the same thing. Okay, and again, we're using these placements, Okay, so this is how to do the dasha. You simply count from the Rashi. We take, first of all, the dasha order is Naisargika Graha dasha order. It's a basic order that we learn in early Parashara. Very early in Parashara, we get this natural succession of planets having to do with the human life cycle. We're born in the moon, then we have our terrible twos in Mars, then we have learning in Mercury, and so on. These are the stages of the life cycle. And at the end, we're adding the nodes and the lagna. So we're applying this, as this is the journey of the human life cycle. So we use this to create a dasha. And each planet will have its dasha will be as many years as the count is by signs from the Rashi chart to whatever Varga chart we're using. So we are using the D5. So we're going to count from the moon sign in Rashi chart to the moon sign in D5. And each sign gets a year. So in this chart, the moon is in Scorpio, and in the D5, it's in Cancer. So that is a count of 9 years. So the first cycle of life is 9 years. So we do that for each one of these grahas. and we come through all the years, and we complete cycle 1, which ended at the person's birthday in 2007, which would be a very important event time in their life. And now we start cycle 2. And for cycle 2, we simply take the number of years will be the remainder when we subtract the first cycle from 12, because there's 12 total rashis, 12 signs. So we have to get a total of 12. We subtract 9 from 12, and so we get 3 years in cycle 2. So see, that it's a very simple count. We don't add or subtract any. We don't do anything for exaltation or debility. We just simply count rashis inclusively. So cycle 2, Moon is 3 years, Mars is 7 years, Mercury is 1 year, Venus is 11 years. So we're currently in Venus. Okay, hopefully that's clear to everybody. So that's how we're doing it. Now we can zero down to look at an Antardasha. And so let's say cycle 2 was Mars from 2010 to 2017. And the way we count it is each year gets one of these rashis. So in the first cycle, Mars was in Leo, and it's in Sag in the D5. So that was 5 years. Year 1 was Leo, Virgo, Libra, Scorpio, Sag. So that was 5 years. Now we're in cycle 2. So we start in the sign that we haven't done yet in cycle 1. So we ended cycle 1 at Sag, where it is in the D5. We start cycle 2 in the next sign, Capricorn. And we go Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, like that. And our last sign in the Antardasha will be the sign that is preceding where the Raha is in the D1 chart. Okay, so I hope that's clear. So our first cycle, we went from Leo to Sag, and in our second cycle, we're going from Capricorn to Cancer. And what do we find? This candidate was previously elected president in the cycle of Mars and Cancer. So what could be significant about that? First of all, Mars is sitting in the Lagna, extremely powerful if you analyze this natal chart. And looking in the D5, what about Cancer, the Antardasha sign? We see a huge yoga here, wow, where we see Moon in Cancer with Venus, Shani, and Ketu, very strategically positioned. This is somebody who is going to occupy center stage with huge presence because of so many planets in the 4 kendras of the D5. His power is such that nobody can ignore this person. And he gets elected president when he comes to this royal sign of Cancer. Okay, so now we'll look again. We're still in cycle 2. Again, currently we are in Venus, and in cycle 2, the signs of Venus go from, in the first cycle, Venus is in Cancer, and in D5, Venus is in Cancer. So cycle 1, Venus was a mere 1 year. And that leaves 11 years for cycle 2. So the first cycle, the first year, Antardasha year, will be Leo, the sign after Venus, which is the 8th house in the D5. And then it will go through all of the each Rashi until we come to Gemini, which is the last one before Venus in the D1. So I've just put the current years mainly here. So in Venus Leo, this person was already, had won an election in 2016 and was in office. And then in Venus Libra, there was a lost the election. So we see Venus is in the 12th house in the Rashi chart, and here it's in this intense yoga in the 7th house. And Libra is the 10th house, and we'll see why that could cause a loss. And the current year is Venus Aquarius. So now he is running again in Venus Aquarius. So just, spelling out for you the analysis that we were just doing. He first won during Mars Cancer. Mars is strong in the D1 Lagna. And, then I went through the details, the 10th Lord, going back to our yoga rules, which we are guiding by throughout our analysis. And so I won't repeat it all here, but there are weaknesses there. There were strengths, actually, that there were some weaknesses, but mainly strengths that got him elected. Like the moon is a Matyakaraka connecting to Cancer in the D1 and D5. Like that. So you go systematically through those rules. And then he lost in 2020 because we see, first of all, the Dasha Lord is weak and prone to loss because it's in the 12th with Shani. And it's in this stellium, which is very complex, in the D5. So sometimes the best planet acts as the worst planet in a complicated conjunction. It's basically in a curse because it's with Shani and Ketu aspected by Mars, Sun, and Rahu. And the 10th Lord which is Venus in the D1, there's Rashi Drishti between the dispositor, but it's problematic. And the moon is Matyakaraka connecting to Cancer in the D1 and D5. In D1, the Libra, which is the Antardasha for this loss, is the 12th of loss from the Amatyakaraka. So he lost the election. And now the same Mahadasha, but this Antardasha, we have Aquarius, which is 8th from Venus in the D1, 8th from Venus in the D5. The lords of Aquarius, Saturn and Rahu, Rahu is damaging the sun by joining it in D1 and D5. And Shani is damaging Venus by joining it. And in D1, this Aquarius Antardasha sign is a Marika sign from the Lagna. It's 4th from the moon, which is the moon's weak house. It's 10th from the sun, which is the sun's weak house. It's 6th from Jupiter, where Jupiter likes to punish. And it's 7th from Mars, where Mars wages war. So these are all pitfalls for this, having the sign of Aquarius. So all of that, we'll take another poll. To me, it shows weakness. Okay, now we'll compare candidate Y. So doing the same thing, we're doing the natal chart. And let's see, do I have a bigger picture of his natal chart? Well, anyway, we'll come to a bigger picture of the natal chart, but here we have a small natal chart, and we have the D5, and we have the Dasha years. So when we go through the exact same procedure, counting from moon in D1 to moon in D5 is 2 years. So that means in cycle 2, it will be 10 years, and so on. He was elected in 2020. So that was during a Venus cycle. And now he's in a Jupiter cycle. So we'll examine those Antardashas. Okay, so looking at Venus cycle when he was elected in the fall of, in 2020, the fall, because birthday came after the election day. So it was Venus Virgo. So we see, first of all, in the D1, the Aruda Lagna for the natal chart is Virgo. So Aruda Lagna is very important for political charts. And let's see, I mentioned some other things here. Because Virgo is ruled by the Atmakaraka Mercury. And when we're talking about Venus in this chart, it's like a pivot of the chart because Venus is in the Lagna conjunct the 10th Lord. The 10th Lord Sun is in Lagna, sitting on a throne. And Venus is the Lord of the 12th, and the 12th is the Karaka Lagna. That's where we have the Atmakaraka Mercury joined to the Lagna Lord Mars. So the strongest type of union between planets and principles is Parivartana. We have Parivartana between Atmakaraka and Lagna through these planets. And 10th Lord. It's all joined very powerfully here. Now, we're in cycle 2. The election will be during Jupiter Libra. And in the natal chart, Libra is the Karaka Lagna in exchange with this 10th Lord Sun, conjunct the Putra Karaka Venus. And in the D5, check out the yogas here. We have Jupiter, which is the Dasha Lord, exalted in the 4th house, where Jupiter can give Mahanta Yoga, a great soul, when it is getting support from Chandra. So here we have Rashi Drishti from Chandra. How is Chandra? Chandra is exalted. Let's check its dispositor, its exaltation lord. It's Shukra. How is Shukra? Just exalted. Let's check its exaltation lord. Jupiter, exalted. So we have this totally virtuous circle. Then we have the Lagna Lord Mars exalted with Rahu, who's dispositing the Atmakaraka in the 10th. So those principles are, if we're just focusing about principles, think of principles. And then, okay, we'll take another poll. Okay, so how are we feeling about X versus Y? Does anybody want to put in the chat X versus Y at this point before we go into the last part about Sarvatobhadra Chakra? I'll give you a couple minutes to think about it or any questions you have. Okay, thank you for responses. Okay, beautiful. Okay, we're still pretty much on the same page. Okay, here's a comment in X's chart, and D5 Shani is Digbal in the 7th house. Pull of the people, Moon, and Ketu extremists. Okay, good points, good arguments. Okay, we can discuss that. We can get to that. But let's complete with the Sarvatobhadra Chakra, and then we can come back for more discussion of things. Okay, so let's see, how are we doing on time? Oh, 6:37. Okay.
We still have about half an hour.
Okay, perfect. Okay, good. Okay, so now we're going to go into this beautiful chakra. I like to call it the magic prism, because the Sarvatabhadra chakra has all of the panchang in it. And so normally we just kind of focus on the nakshatras, which are in this outer ring. However, there's much, much more to it. We have in the center, we have the tithis shown by numbers. We have the varesha shown by the weekday names. And we have the karanas shown by the signs. And that will be very interesting to do this research, like where Sonal is talking about the signs for each karana. When we see lines of force going through these different elements, it brings them to life. And then finally, the Nitya Yoga is shown by the letters. And this drawing doesn't show it, but there's letters in every one of these inner boxes. So these letters are the Akash and show the action of the Nitya Yoga. So here's another view of it. There are many views of Sarvatabhadra chakra. And so what we kind of always usually start with is just this outer ring, which is the placement of the nakshatras. And we go from Kritika over in this eastern corner and to the south, to the west, to the north. And so the nakshatras go in order and they go clockwise. And there's a special little place where Abhijit is, and Abhijit nakshatra is only 4 degrees and change. And so that's over here, but it's figured in. So we have a 28 scheme. And so we're going to use that, and we're going to compare the natal chart. So we put in here the natal planets of a person in these nakshatras. And then we'll see the lines of force that come as the outer transiting planets affect it. So the lines of force are Vedas. Vedas means a piercing ray. And so from where a planet is, it can send a piercing ray in 3 different directions. It can go forward, like here we have Surya, and forward is going in the clockwise direction with perfect geometrical piercing from one box to the next. So if the sun is in Purva Falguni, its forward Veda lands only in Abhijit. Then it has a backwards Veda going geometrically into the appropriate box, which here is Pusha. That's the back Veda. And then it also has a side Veda. And side Vedas do not pierce through the ones in between, because that's where all these other powerful elements of the Panchanga are residing. It just jumps over it. So it's like it jumps from where it is to the one opposite it in the sideways direction. So Purva Falguni will impact Ashwini, but it will not impact Taurus, Gemini, and Cancer and all these things. Whereas a forward Veda, when we get to more advanced things of considering other elements of the Panchang, which we will not talk about today, but the forward Veda would impact all those interior things, but not the side Veda. Okay, so here's the moon putting its forward Veda into Ashwini, its back Veda into Swati, and its side Veda jumping over to Pusha. Okay, then a couple of important things to locate you on the Panchang on the Sarvatabhadra chakra, is knowing like the terrain of it. The corners are very sensitive points because, a graha has all this momentum, it's rushing up through the west, and then it hits a wall and it has to change and go around the corner. So these are places of extreme sensitivity and usually considered painful points. They're called, some refer to them as the scream, when you are in the last pada before you have to change direction, and in the first pada of coming out of this kind of, trauma of hitting the wall and then having to turn. So the last pada leaving and the first pada entering are places of pain. And what they do is they activate the center. The only time this central box where the Purna Tithis are and the Shani weekday is when a planet is in these last pada or first pada going around the corner in the scream. Then when that happens, all four corners get activated. So anything in any of those places will come to life. It can feel like the whole world is on fire. So these are times of great tension. And of course, the moon will go through this, about, every time the moon, it's only 7 nakshatras, and then the moon goes through a corner. So you can watch those transits and note the tension. It just increases, tension increases everywhere. Then the other important thing to note is there are 4 portals, one on each of the 4 directions, where there are more letters. When you study the letters, more aksharas, they have more akash. These are energy vortices. So these 4 nakshatras are like portals to higher levels. Okay, so then the other thing to know is that there are special nakshatras counted from the moon that have meaning. And these can be important for politics and war. I mean, there's different schemes of special nakshatras and everything. So we're just focusing on these for today. And planets here are going to influence these areas of life. Everybody knows Janama, which is the self, which is birth and health. When the moon, this is the moon's nakshatra. And then there are other ones. So for politics, karma, number 10 is very important. This is where the leader should be. And 18 is the final outcome and popularity. And number 23 can be disputes or resolution of disputes, vinashika. Number 27 is the nation. And very important for elections is 28, the final nakshatra behind the moon. This is coronation and victory. This is Abhishek Nakshatra, which is the blessing. Okay, so we'll take our natal charts. What we'll do is we put the candidate or one person in this one ring of nakshatras that's colored in blue. This is the natal chart for the person we're studying. And then we put another ring outside it, which is the transiting nakshatras. So with this, we can overlay, if we have a planet conjunct a natal planet, we map it right onto it. And then from there, we can do the Vedas, like this Jupiter. And this is just, doesn't matter whose chart, but this is just an example. If we're looking at Jupiter, we know we trace the back Veda geometrically, diagonally, perfectly, and it comes to this point. And so that means that transiting Ketu is impacting both the Jupiter that's there and the back Veda that Jupiter is making over here. Okay, so it can be confusing because we're creating 2 rings of nakshatras. The inner ring will be the native or the candidate. The outer ring will be the planets, and we will map them onto the natal place, and then from there draw a Veda to see what is it impacting. Okay, so here's candidate X, and the outer ring here is election day. This is figured for Washington, D.C. around noon on election day. You could pick any time of day. it will change the ascendant, but everything else will be pretty much the same. And so we see in here is the natal chart of the candidate. Remember, he had Mars on the ascendant. There's Mars on the ascendant. He has Jupiter. He has Moon with Ketu, Sun with Rahu, all of those planets. Now we want to see on election day, how are the transits hitting? So very important. Now, always on election day, the sun is going to be in the same place because the election is held on roughly the same date every time there's an election. The sun will always be in Vishaka Nakshatra. It will always be putting forward, it will always be on Vishaka and putting a forward Veda onto Anuradha. And so any candidate for office is likely to have something important in Anuradha. Otherwise, they wouldn't make it to the stage of being in a national election. So that's just something to know. So we don't pay too much attention to how the sun is on election day, because that's like a fixed static thing. What we pay more attention to is the moon. The moon will choose the winner. And we look at the other planets, changing planets. Mercury and Venus are there. Rahu is there. Jupiter is there. Jupiter will be important. Mars and Ketu. So what do we find? We'll check first the moon. And so the transit moon is in Mula, from Mula, we draw a forward Veda. And what do we find? We find the transit is karma. That's totally fitting because we're picking the leader of a country. What do we find in the natal candidate? Nothing. Let's look at the back Veda of the moon. We come from Mula backwards, and we find Jupiter. And Jupiter is in the mind nakshatra and it's retrograde. Okay, so we just note that. We do the side Veda of the moon, jumping across to Punarvasu, and we see the candidate's natal Venus and Saturn. So if we remember, he's in Venus Dasha, Sargika Dasha. We can check, this blue is the candidate's natal chart. We can check how are Venus and Saturn. Venus and Saturn are in the 12th house. Okay, now we can look at Venus, which is very important in an election chart for victory and happiness. It's in the transiting coronation nakshatra, so it wants to bestow a crown on somebody. How is it connecting to the candidate? It's on his janama. It's on his natal moon and Ketu. And it's putting a straight Veda over there with Mars onto his location. And at the same time, Mars is putting a straight Veda right back onto Venus. So on election day, we have a Gandanta going on. We have Venus going sideways this way and Mars going sideways this way. This is Gandanta. And so it's a troublesome transit. And where is it following? On Janama. Then finally, to note, we have Ketu. And Ketu is, the back Veda is very important for Ketu because he's very backwards facing. And his back Veda is going, we go up here to Hasta, and then we go geometrically back to Mercury, the natal Mercury of the candidate, which is a good planet for him. But Ketu and Mercury is a difficult, Ketu makes Mercury prone to broken limbs, and it's with the debts, transiting debts nakshatra. Okay, so that's going through those. Now we'll do the same thing for candidate Y. Okay, candidate Y. Same procedure. We have around the inner here, we have the natal planets. So we see candidate Y has Sun and Venus with ascendant. So here we have Sun and Venus with ascendant in Anuradha. The Sun is putting its forward Veda onto that Sun and Venus Anuradha. But as mentioned, the Sun transit is always going to be the same. It just means, is this person, likely to be a candidate? But now we want to see these key things. Start with the moon, and the moon in Mula going forward. It's putting its Veda, which is career transit, on natal coronation, the natal coronation. Then looking over here at Jupiter, which is retrograding, it's putting a back Veda, coronation. Then we look at this Gandanta of Mars and Venus, which is very troubling sideways nakshatra. I mean, it's a sideways thing, which we don't want to get into that. Do we see anything natal being hit there? No, except for the special nakshatra called overall final result. So Venus coronation is on the overall final result for candidate Y. So there's definitely going to be tension and pressure, but basically having Venus there is positive. Then checking transit Mercury, which is in nation. This is an issue of national interest. It's conjunct the natal Sun and Venus, which is the 10th Lord for candidate Y. And Mercury is his natal AK. With this 10th Lord, Sun and Venus. And Mercury's back Veda is on the transiting community, special nakshatra. So that will change from year to year. So community, again, is like the country as a whole. And the, so yeah. Okay, so basically those are the key factors. So now let's make one more prediction. You be the predictor. We have X and Y revealed, and let's see what everybody thinks at this point. Okay, I'll just, still Y. Okay. All right. So, yeah. So I think if we try to stay neutral and we try to give full due to all the principles, we come out with candidate Y, who we can now reveal is Joe Biden, the current occupant of office. So, many people will think that's so impossible because the other candidate so dominates the airwaves and seems so formidable and has such a dominating chart. But we look at this chart of Joe Biden, we see the Aruda Lagna is in Virgo, and it's not fortified hardly at all. So that really has to do with who he is. Very low charisma, mild-mannered, hard to listen to, usually turn him off if you hear him on the TV or whatever. But really, when we think of his chart, it's like Clark Kent, because underneath his mild-mannered exterior is a Superman with mighty yogas. When we go by principles, the yogas are so powerful. And so it's really, so that seems to be where we have to go, So now let's recap this And if you only have a few minutes to make a prediction, how we do this is just a recap. We check the Yoga Pravesh and the Yogi in D1 and D5 for the two head of state yogas. Then we do this village dasha, RTA, from Rashi to divisional chart, and see the current Amsha in D1 and D5, study that. And then finally, look at the Sarvatobhadra chakra and putting the transits around the outside and seeing who has Vedas on the coronation nakshatra or karma nakshatra and whose natal coronation nakshatra or karma nakshatra gets flagged and tagged by the transits. Okay, so here we're saving the, I'm giving you the chart data. So if you want to go back and look at any of these, you can get their Yoga Pravesh and their Tithi Pravesh, their natal charts. This will be inauguration in Washington, D.C., and this will be election day. Okay, so that's it. And so then we can discuss, debate people can bring up their thoughts, objections, questions, whatever. See, there's some questions and answers here.
Amazing, Satsriji. This was really comprehensive and huge implications. So absolutely fantastic. I mean, you've covered like almost all of them. So, I think it would probably these techniques would work for every single thing rather than just elections, right?
Yeah, exactly. If you just,
Yeah.
what are the correct yogas to use for some issue you're considering? You could use it for a medical diagnosis for so many things. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, it's like wow. And the Naisargika Tulya Amsha Rashi, that's really fantastic.
Yes, it's very beautiful, very simple.
Yeah. So you use that for Panchamsha, but really you could use it for anything with any divisional chart, really, right?
Yeah, it works brilliantly with any divisional chart you want to focus on.
Wow. Fabulous. Fantastic technique. Thank you very much. Very well laid out, absolutely. I think there's no doubt that if we just follow that, it's like a template. If we follow that properly, it will work. So, anyone, any questions? No? Everyone's gobsmacked or what? Are you are you predicting Biden's death? Deborah, should she be?
What did she say? Deborah asked,
Oh my God. Okay.
what did she say?
No,
She said, are you predicting Biden's death?
Oh,
I just saw you mentioned something about problems after election.
I
And
somebody was going to mention, I wasn't going to bring that up unless somebody mentioned it, but you're too eagle-eyed. Okay, then I have to say that. That was kind of
Yeah, I did see that actually, to be honest, but I wasn't sure. Oh my God. Oh Lord. Okay. But
Yeah.
I think that's the plan. Sorry, I want to just say one thing. But isn't that the plan really? So that they can actually do what they feel like once they have him under, because they know that he's not really going to survive for too long.
Well,
And
no, that sounds
yeah.
a little bit cynical, but but yeah, Well, yeah, okay, yes. I mean, everybody's very worried about this candidate's age and everything. But they're both old men, really. They both have definite problems in those departments. But yeah, when we just look at the chart, it was very interesting to see the this this yoga pravesh, which is
Yeah.
the underlying, Akash, and it relates to the nakshatra, which is longevity. And when we see this chart, what do we see? The houses we've learned to study for longevity are all kind of ominously occupied. We have Shani, we have in the first, we have, Mangal and Sun in the eighth, which, that's a great strength, but it's also longevity red flag with this Ketu in the eighth. So all of that is there. And then, yes, I've studied the chart of Kamala Harris, the VP thing and all that. So yeah, I definitely have concern about longevity in office, but it says kingship is promised, when we follow Prajar's rules, kingship is, but then we say, well, how long, and then we can get into other timing.
Well, I think not judging from, is it the right-hand side that you're looking at, right? This right-hand side one? Because I can't see very well here. Is it the Rashi chakra on the right-hand side on the screen, right?
Yeah, looking at this.
So, I mean, even in the third house, it's a full, because third house is also impacts on longevity, right? And so it's got a MK as Jupiter there.
Right, you are. And Chandra is not good in the third house for longevity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's probably Chandra is in Bharani, or I can't see. Ooh, it's too fine a print.
Yeah, it's Ashwini.
Okay.
But Jupiter is in Bharani.
Okay, so then we are in the
And
yeah,
terribly afflicted by Shani and Rahu. Yes, very bad, very, very bad.
Yeah, it doesn't look good. Yeah, I agree with you, Deborah. I mean, if Trump has been like a criminal record, and now he's like, he can still run for presidency. And I don't understand one thing though, guys. Maybe you can all explain it to me. Is that if you look at the all the past presidents, like Clinton, he had like he lied and everything, and he was like during the time of his reign, he was literally he did what he did. So why is it so horrible? Like Trump, he's not even a president at the moment. And while he was fighting the election, he just paid off some woman. Why is that such a big thing? I mean, I don't understand it.
Sonal, I mean, this is maybe take it off the recording, but
yeah, no, yeah.
But Bill Clinton lied under oath because he went under oath. Trump has never gone under oath because literally everything he would say would be a lie. And that's why he doesn't do emails. He's been very cagey. But so Bill Clinton lied about an affair that didn't have anything to do with winning an election. It was an affair he had. And then, but Trump's lies are about his finances, his dealings with foreign countries while he was president, and even now. The issue with paying a porn star, that wasn't the point. The point was that he hid the payoff and the NDA and didn't disclose it properly under financial election laws. So that is the crime.
Okay. So essentially, he fudged the financial thing. But to be honest, it is his own money, though, is it not?
No, that's not how it works in our country. We have laws about disclosure, and he violated them in order to win the election. He did that to hide this issue before the election because he had just been exposed about the so the P word grabbing. And so women were not happy. People were backing away, and this would have been possibly the final blow, and he might not have become president had this come out before the election.
Right, right. Okay. Well, I think anyway, yeah, it's a tough one, huh? Very tough, because it's no point getting, I mean, well, I guess, you know, it's the course of the collective consciousness where it's going, you know, to have Biden back and then have him, I mean, or rather him go through some kind of a death-like situation or actual real death, to be honest, because it is sort of reflective of what the unconscious or subconscious on a collective level is voting for, really, in a way. So, yeah, how interesting. Fascinating. Anyone has any other questions? No, I think they're all
I have a question.
Yes, yes,
I
go
was
on.
just Satsuri, how would you see like or how the deputy to the president, if you had the demise of either candidate at any point, how would you see that? Would you take it from, say, once the election is known and you had the inauguration, would you be able to predict rulership after that?
Yeah, that's a really excellent question, Rosemary. And you know, unfortunately, I haven't put a lot of thought into it, you know, because you know, I mean, as you can tell in this, I just really picked out the rules and stuck to the rules. I'm not good at just making predictions off the cuff, you know, and that's kind of my whole part of my point here is that, you know, we sort of have to go like tortoises and be bound to our little rules because the rules are the gifts.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you're asking what do we use for like in America, it's called the vice president, you know, so you're asking how would we see the vice president in this chart? Okay, just quickly, what I would do is I would go to the inauguration chart, which I have studied. And, you know, I see a lot of connections between the inauguration chart and the chart of Kamala Harris, which I've studied. But I don't have enough to give you more answers than that. You know, I've been asked, you know, I'm going to organize some classes on some of these techniques. So if anybody wants to email me about it, we're going to have like about 6 or 8 classes on some of these related things. But it's really
Fabulous, fabulous.
too much to cover, you know, kind of that.
Yeah.
Really good question, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, thank you ever so much, because we are now a few minutes late for the next speaker. So, so thank you ever so much. And if you have further questions, take it on the Telegram group. So we will begin straight away. I will make Oksana the host. Where is Oksana? Okay, there we go. There she is. Oops, sorry for the being late. Okay, there you go, Oksana.
Yes, so now thank you. Can you actually hear me and can you see me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Oksana, let me introduce you firstly.
Yes, please, yes.
One sec, 1 minute, guys. Let me start the
Okay.
recording. Okay, let's give a few seconds to, is this